folks. This is John White, and this is your COVID-19 devotional for the day. Today I want to talk about a problem that I think afflicts the church, and that is the interpretation of Scripture. We have a lot of different opinions when it comes to theological ideas in the Presbyterian church and among other churches as well. Those ideas don't stem from the fact that we don't take Scripture seriously. We do take Scripture seriously. The problem tends to come when we interpret Scripture differently, or when we take only portions of Scripture to be important in our lives. That gives us like half a picture of what we're trying to understand. For example, in Matthew 23, the 23rd chapter of Matthew, we read these words. Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, the really good church people. And he says this to them: "Woe to you, teachers of the law, Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make him twice as much a child of hell as you yourself. Woe to you, teachers of the law, Pharisees, you hypocrites, who give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. But you have neglected the more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides! You strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside, you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside, you're full of hypocrisy and wickedness." Now, what if those were some of your favorite verses and you had those framed and hung on the wall in your living room? What picture does that give you of Jesus? What kind of person do you think Jesus is when you read that and only that? Jesus was furious with the Pharisees because of the direction of their teaching. But if you read only this, you would think that Jesus was an enemy of the church. Jesus was an enemy of religion. And we know that's not the truth because of the other things that Jesus did and the way he showed love and acceptance of different people all through his life. We have to combine the different aspects of the life of Jesus, or the teachings of Paul, or the teachings of the Old Testament, so that we don't get just a partial picture, but we're able to see what comes across in the whole. We also have a problem with some things when we pick out our favorite scriptures and focus only on those. You know, in the Gospels, Jesus talks more about stewardship than he does about anything else, but we don't read those verses so often. We don't remember those. Instead, we tend to read the things that Jesus did, the miracles and the stories of how he interacted with and healed people. But sometimes we have to remember that our favorite parts of Scripture also only give part of the story. For example, there's a story in the 20th chapter of the book of Acts, and it's about Paul and preaching. And maybe this is one of my favorite stories in Scripture. Let me read it to you. "On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. Paul spoke to the people, and because he intended to leave the next day, he kept on talking until midnight. There were many lamps in the upstairs room where we were meeting. Seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. When he was sound asleep, Eutychus fell to the ground from the third story and was picked up dead. Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, and put his arms around him. "Don't be alarmed," Paul said. "He's alive." Then he went upstairs again and broke bread and ate. After talking until daylight, now that's some hardcore preaching, he left. The people took the young man home alive and were greatly comforted. Now that's a great little story for preachers to remember. You fall asleep during the preacher's sermon, you might just fall out a window and land on your head, and that's bad for everybody. So stay awake while you're in church. But that's not the whole story of Paul's teachings. Paul also talks about his adventures as he traveled in missionary journeys and starting the new churches as he traveled. There's also a tendency to like stories that are entertaining or funny, kind of remember those stories. There's one particular story from 2 Kings chapter 2. It's about Elisha, not Elijah, but Elisha. And this story reminds me of somebody. It reminds me of Harbert Alexander Sr., not Junior. Junior can sit the triplets on me. I'm talking about Harbert Sr. You know, I was sitting with Harbert in his house the other day visiting, and I wanted to conclude my visit, so I said, "Okay, Harbert, I'm going to get out of your hair and leave." Well, those of you who know Harbert know that there's not but about 4 hairs up here on top of his head. So when I said that, we both laughed. We got a good laugh out of it. And I know Harbert is not too sensitive about this. Anyway, this story kind of reminded me of him. It's not good to tease bald people. From 2 Kings, the 2nd chapter, from there, Elisha went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some boys came out of the town and jeered at him. "Get out of here, Baldy," they said. "Get out of here, Baldy." Elisha turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them from the name of the Lord. Then 2 she-bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. And Elisha went on to Mount Carmel, and from there returned to Samaria. That's just a funny story that reminds me of Harbert. Of course, Harbert would never call down a she-bear to maul me just because I made fun of him. Wait, do I hear something? I do. It's Harbert's big monkey! Harbert's big monkey! That'll teach you, big monkey. Don't mess with me. Remember, don't take only parts of Scripture. Don't take only the Scripture that you think is funny or entertaining. Take it as a whole. Have a good evening.